You think you're safe and at the store, in your apartment, walking to your car. But sometimes a stranger is already watching, and by the time you notice, it's too late. In this video, we bring you 10 terrifying, true stories experienced by women who were simply going about their normal lives until a stranger stepped in. These aren't ghost tales or urban legends. They are real-life moments of fear, confusion, and gut-wrenching instinct. Moments where something felt off, and that something turned out to be very real. From late-night knocks on the door, to being followed in parking lots, to strangers pretending to know you. Each story is a chilling reminder that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just stands quietly in the dark, watching. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and listen closely, because these stories could happen to anyone, even you. Story 1. The Man in the Hotel Hallway. Name is Julia. I'm 29, and last winter, I went on a solo business trip to Chicago. It was only for 2 nights, and since the company booked the hotel, I didn't pay much attention to the area. It looked safe enough. Nothing fancy, but not sketchy either. The first night went smoothly. I checked in, ordered room service, and worked from the hotel desk until midnight. I locked the door, double-checked the deadbolt, and finally fell asleep. The next night, around 11:30 p.m., I was finishing up a video call with a client when I heard it. 3 soft knocks on my hotel door. Not a loud banging, just 3 calm, deliberate knocks. I froze. Housekeeping wouldn't knock this late. I hadn't ordered food, and the front desk hadn't called me. I approached the door slowly and checked the peephole. At first I didn't see anyone. Then I looked down. A man in a black hoodie was standing just off to the side, his head low. I couldn't see his face. He wasn't standing directly in front of the peephole. He was deliberately hiding from it. I backed away immediately and grabbed my phone. I dialed the front desk. "Hi, someone's knocking at my door. I don't know who it is." The receptionist sounded calm. "Ma'am, we'll send security up right now. Stay inside and don't open the door." I turned off all the lights in the room and sat in the dark with my back against the wall, holding my phone tight. About 5 minutes passed. Then the knock came again, but this time it was louder. 4 slow knocks, then silence. That was the worst part, the silence. Just as I was about to call the front desk, again, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy ones. Voices followed. A man saying, "Hey, what are you doing up here?" Then, "Sir, I need to see your room key." Security. I opened the door. After they confirmed it was safe. The man had no ID, no room booked, and no explanation. He had wandered up to my floor, then lied, and said he was looking for someone. The floor I was on was accessible only by keycard in the elevator. They escorted him out, but I didn't sleep that night. I pushed a chair against the door and sat upright until morning. Story 2. The man who followed me from the gym. My name is Natalie. I'm 25 years old, and I live alone in a small apartment complex just outside of Austin, Texas. I try to go to the gym most evenings after work. It helps me decompress and clears my head. Usually I go around 7 p.m., and I'm home before 9. But one night last month, something happened. That still makes me feel sick when I think about it. It was a Tuesday. The gym was a little quieter than usual. I remember finishing my workout just after 8:30 p.m. I stretched, grabbed my bag, and headed to my car. The parking lot was mostly empty by then, just a few vehicles near the back. As I was unlocking my car, I noticed a man leaning against a black SUV, smoking. He was staring directly at me. I looked away quickly, pretending I hadn't seen him, but something about him felt wrong. He wasn't dressed like someone who had been working out, and I hadn't seen him inside. I got into my car, locked the doors immediately, and tried to shake off the nerves. Maybe he was just waiting for someone. I turned on my music and started driving. But after a few minutes on the road, I noticed something in my rearview mirror. That same black SUV, 2 cars behind me. I told myself I was being paranoid still. I took a few random turns before getting near my street. He was still there. At this point, my hands were shaking. I didn't want to drive directly to my apartment, so I kept going, circling a few nearby blocks. When I turned into a gas station and pulled up near the front, The SUV slowly drove past, then parked across the street with its lights off. Now I was sure he was following me. I called my friend Amanda and told her everything in a whisper. She told me not to go home. I sat in my locked car, pretending to scroll through my phone, and waited. After about 10 minutes, the SUV drove off. I still didn't feel safe, so I drove to Amanda's place and stayed the night. The next day, I asked the gym manager if they had security cameras in the lot. They did. I filed a report with the police and showed them a photo I had secretly taken of the SUV's license plate while pretending to be on my phone. It turned out the plate was fake. They never found the guy. Ever since that night, I've changed my routine. I never go to the gym after dark anymore. I carry pepper spray, and I always check behind me before unlocking my car. And now, every time I pass a black SUV, I feel my heart skip a beat. Story 3, The Man in the Library Parking Lot. My name is Rachel, and I'm 21 years old. I'm a college student, and most weekdays I study late at the campus library. It's quiet, warm, and open until midnight. I usually feel safe there, until the night I stayed just a little too long. It was a Thursday during midterms. The library was mostly empty by 11:45 p.m. I packed my laptop, grabbed my backpack, and headed to the parking lot. It was one of those colder spring nights with a weird silence that made every sound seem louder. As I walked to my car, I noticed another student, or so I thought, walking slowly behind me. He had a hoodie up, hands in his pockets, and was about 30 feet back. That part of the lot was dim, and most other students had already left. I picked up my pace. When I got to my car, I hit the unlock button and quickly jumped inside. I looked in the mirror. He was still walking in my direction, but now more quickly. Then something odd happened. Instead of passing by or heading to his own car, he stopped 3 feet from my driver's side window and stared at me. Not waving, not knocking, just staring. I froze. I wanted to lock the doors, but I already had. I started the engine, hoping he'd back away. Instead, he moved around to the passenger side and tried the door handle. Click, rattle. I hit the horn hard and long. That seemed to spook him. He took a few steps back, then ran off toward the edge of the lot. Not toward the dorms, not toward the main road, just into the woods behind the campus. I drove straight to the campus police station, my hands shaking the entire way. They took a report, but said without camera footage or a license plate, there wasn't much they could do. I've never seen him again. But now, every time I walk to my car, day or night, I keep my keys in my fist and my phone already dialing someone. I was lucky, and I never, ever stay until midnight anymore. Story 4, The Knock That Knew My Name. My name is Amber. I was 26 at the time, recently divorced, and living alone for the first time in my life. I had just moved into a small rental house on the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. My dog, Luna, was my comfort. A lazy golden retriever who didn't bark unless someone was literally at the door. She was a sweetheart, but not much of a guard dog. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly, not from a nightmare, not from a noise, just a feeling. That strange weight in your chest, like something's watching you. I got up, checked the front door, locked. Back door, also locked. Luna was asleep by the couch, totally unbothered. I shrugged it off and went to the kitchen to get some water. That's when I heard it. A knock on the window. Not the door, the window. It wasn't a hard bang, just a slow, methodical tap, tap, tap on the glass, like someone using one finger. My blood froze. I turned off the kitchen light and stood still. I didn't move. The blinds were drawn, but I knew someone was right outside. My heart was pounding, so loud I was afraid they'd hear it. Then I heard it. A whisper. Amber. My name. My actual name. Not, hey. Not miss. Not anyone home. Just Amber. I couldn't breathe. Whoever was out there knew me. My house had no visible address number from the street. I had just moved in 2 weeks prior. I hadn't told many people, and they whispered it again. Amber, I know you're in there. I grabbed my phone and dropped it. The screen lit up the floor, and I scrambled to pick it up. Hands shaking, Luna suddenly growled, a deep, low sound I had never heard from her before. She was standing, ears back, facing the window. I dialed 911, whispered everything. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, stay on the line, and that a patrol car was already nearby and on the way. Just then, the whispering stopped. The knocking stopped. I heard footsteps walking along the side of the house toward the backyard. Then, silence, complete crushing silence. When police arrived, they found footprints outside the kitchen, window, barefoot. And in the backyard, they found something worse. A pillow and blanket carefully laid out under the deck. Someone had been sleeping there, maybe for days. But the worst part, on the window where the knock came from, was a note written in grease pencil. "You look peaceful when you sleep." I moved out 3 days later. Never went back. The landlord understood. I still don't know who he was or how he knew my name. But ever since that night, I don't sleep near windows, and I always keep something by the bed, just in case someone comes knocking again. Story 5, The Man in the Hoodie Who Sat Too. Close, my name is Danielle, and I was 28 when this happened. I was working a late shift at a small bookstore downtown and relied on public transportation to get home. My apartment was in a safe area, but the last bus stop was still a good 10-minute walk from my building. And at 11:30 p.m., the streets could feel abandoned. One rainy Thursday night, I finished closing the store and rushed to the bus stop, only to realize I had missed the 11:15 bus by minutes. The next one wouldn't come until midnight. There was no one else at the stop, just the steady sound of light rain hitting the roof of the shelter and distant traffic. I pulled out my phone to distract myself, but the battery was at 3%. I turned it off to save power in case I needed it later. That's when I noticed someone approaching. A man, tall, thin, wearing a soaked gray hoodie pulled low over his face. His jeans were sagging and muddy at the bottom. He sat down right next to me. Let me emphasize that there were 3 empty benches, and he chose mine. Sat down, so close our legs nearly touched. He didn't say a word. I shifted slightly away, pretending not to notice. He lit a cigarette and exhaled loudly. After about a minute, he spoke. "You live around here?" I gave a polite, vague, kinda, hoping he'd stop. "Yeah, you look like someone I used to." "No," he continued, staring at me but never blinking. Something about the way he said that made my skin crawl. I smiled nervously and pretended to check my phone. He leaned closer. "You live alone." That was it. My heart dropped, and I stood up quickly, saying I forgot something at work, and started walking away from the stop, fast. I didn't care if I missed the bus. I just needed away from him. He didn't call out, didn't follow, or so I thought. I took a side alley that led to the back of the bookstore, a shortcut I'd used dozens of times. I reached the back door and turned to make sure I was alone, and I wasn't. He was there, not walking, not running, standing, at the mouth of the alley, maybe 20 feet away, not moving, just staring. I fumbled with my keys, barely able to breathe. Got the door open, slammed it shut behind me, and locked it. I hid behind the counter and waited. I don't know how long, maybe 10 minutes, maybe more. When I finally looked out the small back window, he was gone. The next day, I reported it to police, and they took a statement. A few nights later, another woman reported being followed from that same bus stop, then another. Eventually, patrols were increased in that area. I started taking ride shares home after that, no matter the cost, and I never sit at an empty bus stop alone again. Story 6. He waited behind my car. My name is Rachel. I was 32 when this happened, a freelance photographer who often drove long distances for late photo shoots. That night, I had been shooting a small private event just outside the city and didn't finish until after 11 p.m. The venue was remote, a renovated barn surrounded by woods and a long gravel driveway that ended in a small parking area. Most guests had left by then, and I was the last one out. I had packed my equipment and started toward my car, parked in the farthest corner beneath a flickering light pole. It was dead silent. No wind, no bugs, just that buzzing light and the sound of my boots crunching gravel. As I reached my car, I felt watched. You know, that primal instinct that makes your neck tingle, that feeling that someone is just there. I turned around. Nothing. I unlocked the car and opened the back to load my gear. I placed the last camera case in and shut the trunk. And that's when I heard breathing. Not mine, his. He was crouched behind my car. A man, filthy jeans, wild hair, dirt all over his arms, like he had crawled out of the woods. His eyes wide, bloodshot, empty. We locked eyes, and he smiled. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My voice disappeared. I jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the door. As I fumbled with the keys, he lunged forward, slamming both hands on the side window, still smiling, still silent. I turned the ignition and floored it, swerving. So hard my tires kicked gravel in his face. He didn't chase, just stood there watching me speed off into the night. I drove 30 minutes before I could even breathe again. Parked at a gas station, shaking, sobbing. I told the police. They searched the property the next day and found signs that someone had been living in the nearby woods, torn blankets, empty cans, even some of the catering food thrown out after the event, picked through and half eaten. But no man, no prints, no ID, no one ever caught. Even now, whenever I park alone at night, I check behind my car. I can't help it, because I learned that sometimes monsters don't come from fairy tales. Sometimes they just wait quietly behind your car. Story 7. The man in the wheelchair who wasn't a patient. My name is Lisa, and I've worked as an emergency room nurse for nearly 9 years. I've seen a lot, from chaotic trauma nights to heartbreaking goodbyes, but nothing has ever unsettled me like what happened last December during an overnight shift. It was a snowstorm. Thick, wet snow was falling in sheets, and we were short-staffed. I was one of only 2 nurses left by 3 a.m. Most of the ER bays were empty, except for one sleeping patient. Around 3:15 a.m. I was doing rounds, just checking supplies and prepping for any incoming emergencies. That's when I noticed something off in the waiting room. We had closed intake hours earlier, and no one had entered through the main doors since midnight. But there was a wheelchair sitting just past the entry doors, and in it, a man. He wasn't familiar. He was wearing a dark coat, soaked from the snow, and his head was slumped forward, like he was asleep. At first, I assumed he had slipped in earlier and waited for help. I approached the glass door that led to the lobby and knocked gently. No movement. I used my keycard and stepped out. "Sir?" I said quietly. No response. As I got closer, I saw his shoes were completely dry. His coat, though wet, had no snow melting off it. Then he slowly lifted his head. His eyes locked onto mine. No blink, no sign of injury, just a dead stare. He whispered, "You left the door open for me." Chills shot down my spine. I'm sorry? Sir, are you here for medical assistance?" I asked, stepping back slightly. "No, I just wanted to be close to you again." My heart sank. I had never seen this man before in my life. "Who are you?" I asked. This time firm. He smiled slowly. "You helped me once." I never forgot. Now I was truly unnerved. I pressed the emergency badge clip to my scrubs, alerting security. I backed into the ER doors and told him to wait right there. He didn't move. Security arrived in under a minute. But when they came through the door, the wheelchair was empty, completely gone. No footprints, no man. We checked the footage. Here's what we saw. The camera caught the moment I walked out and approached the man. But in the footage, I was standing alone, talking to no one, nothing, no wheelchair, no figure, just me in the dark lobby. They thought I was hallucinating from exhaustion, but I wasn't, because after I went home that morning, I found something in my mailbox, a folded note, in shaky handwriting. It said, "You saved me once. I wanted to save you too." He was in the trauma wing. To this day, I don't know what that means, but that same night, we later discovered that a man had snuck into the back of the hospital, armed. He was caught near the trauma wing, pacing, waiting, no one knows for who. I think someone or something warned me. Story 8. Someone was already inside my Airbnb. My name's Chloe. I travel a lot for work, mostly marketing projects, conferences, brand deals. Last year I had a solo trip to Oregon, and instead of a hotel, I decided to rent a cute little Airbnb cabin near the woods. It looked perfect. Cozy fireplace, large windows, private road, a peaceful weekend. I arrived late afternoon, around 6 p.m., The host had left the keys in a lockbox, and I let myself in. It smelled like cedar and coffee. I remember smiling and thinking, finally, some peace. By 9 p.m., the sky outside was pitch black. I poured some tea, lit the fireplace, and began reading a book in the small armchair facing the window. There was no TV, and my phone had barely 1 bar of service. At around 10:15, I heard something, a soft creak. I assumed it was just the old cabin settling, but then it happened again, louder, like someone stepping inside the hallway. There was only one bedroom. The hallway led to a storage closet, and the bathroom. I stood up and froze. My cup of tea was shaking in my hand. I slowly walked toward the hall, flipped on the light. Nothing. I told myself it was just the wood. I went to brush my teeth, turned out the lights, and climbed into bed. But sleep didn't come easily. Around midnight, I woke up again because I heard a door click shut. This time, I sat up instantly. My eyes adjusted to the dim light from the hallway. Then I saw it. The closet door was slightly open. I knew I had closed it. I remembered checking everything before bed. I grabbed my phone and opened the flashlight. I stepped out, trembling. I approached the door, hand outstretched, when I heard breathing from inside. Slow, measured, not mine. I backed away in pure panic, ran to the front door, locked. Deadbolt was still in place, which meant whoever was inside had already been here. I ran to the car barefoot, jumped in, and drove down the dirt road until I had a single bar of service. I called 911. The police met me at the local station. I didn't even go back alone. When officers searched the cabin, they found a man hiding in the attic crawl space. He had been living there for at least 2 days. Clothes, water bottles, even food he'd taken from the kitchen. He had written in a notebook. They found next to his things one sentence repeated over and over. "Why, she's so calm. I want to see what happens when she's scared." I never returned to that cabin. I don't think I'll ever stay alone again. Story 9. We're outside. Why aren't you answering? My name's Danielle. I'm 24, and at the time of this story, I had just moved into my first solo apartment. A small 1-bedroom place in the suburbs of Washington. Quiet neighborhood, nothing ever really happened there. It was a Friday night, and I had plans to binge watch Netflix with a pizza and finally relax after a long week. Around 9:30 p.m., I got a call from an unknown number. I normally never answer those, but something about it felt urgent. So I picked up. A man's voice said, "Hi, your food is here. We're outside." I was confused. I hadn't ordered anything. I said, "Sorry, you have the wrong number." But then he repeated my full name. "Danielle Harper, right? This is your address, right? 1820 Meadow Lane?" I froze. That was my address. He continued, "We have your pizza. You ordered online, right?" I hadn't. I hung up immediately and locked the deadbolt on the door. Then I peeked through the peephole. 2 men were standing at the bottom of the steps. One of them was holding a pizza box, but it was open, empty. They weren't wearing delivery uniforms, no hats, no name tags, just dark jackets and jeans. Then one of them pulled out a phone and started dialing again. A few seconds later, my phone rang, same unknown number. I muted it. Then came the message. A voicemail. I hesitated before listening. The man's voice, now slower, darker, whispered, "Why aren't you opening the door? We just want to talk." I felt sick to my stomach. I turned off every light in my apartment and went to the back bedroom. My heart was racing. I stayed completely silent and called 911 from under the bed. The operator stayed on the line with me. When officers arrived 12 minutes later, the men were gone. But here's the part that still makes my blood run cold. When police reviewed the camera on the building across the street, they found footage of the 2 men arriving in a moving truck. Inside the truck, ropes, duct tape, and zip ties. They were never caught. I don't know what would have happened if I had opened that door, but I haven't ordered delivery or answered a call from an unknown number since. Story 10. The closet wasn't empty last night. My name is Jenna. I was 19. When this happened, a sophomore in college, living in a small campus dorm room with one roommate. It was late October, midterms week. My roommate had gone home for the weekend, so I had the room to myself. At least I thought I did. I stayed up late studying, snacking on chips, watching a few dumb YouTube videos before finally turning the lights off around 2 a.m. I always check the closet before bed, something my mom taught me growing up. Silly habit maybe, but that night, I remember clearly opening the door. Nothing was inside but my coats and shoes. I shut it and got into bed. Sometime later, I don't know when, maybe 3:30, I woke up because something creaked. A long, slow creaking sound, like old wood being stepped on. At first, I thought it came from outside, in the hallway, but then I realized it was in my room. I was frozen in bed, my eyes strained in the darkness. I didn't move a muscle, just listened. Another sound, a quiet breath, so close. I slowly reached for my phone, turned the screen on low brightness. It was 3:48 a.m. Then I noticed something. The closet door, which I had closed, was now slightly ajar, just barely open. That's when the panic hit. I wanted to scream, but my voice died in my throat. I stared at the door for what felt like an eternity, not blinking, barely breathing, and then it moved, ever so slightly, like someone inside was adjusting their weight. I jumped out of bed, bolted for the hallway, and ran down to the RA's room barefoot. She called campus security. When they arrived and searched my room, they opened the closet slowly with their flashlights drawn, and there he was, a man, curled in the corner of my closet, wearing a black hoodie, clutching a small kitchen knife. He had climbed in earlier, that evening when the building door was propped, open for a dorm party, and hid in my closet for hours. He didn't say a word as they arrested him. The most terrifying part? When they searched him later, they found a folded piece of notebook paper. On it, in messy writing, was a single line repeated over and over. "She's prettier when she's sleeping." I haven't slept with the closet door closed ever since. These women trusted their instincts, and it might have saved their lives. Whether it was a stranger at the door, someone staring from the shadows, or a quiet figure waiting in the dark, each moment was a test of awareness, courage, and survival. In a world that often tells women they're overreacting, these stories prove that intuition is powerful, because sometimes feeling scared means there is something to fear. So stay alert, trust your gut, and remember, not all strangers are harmless. If you found these stories powerful or relatable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true experiences from everyday people who lived through the unthinkable. Stay safe out there, and don't ignore the feeling that someone might be watching.